Over the last several decades, research in the area of assessment has moved us away from a focus on summative assessment to attending to ongoing formative assessment. Really this notion that learning and assessment are integrated, and when we engage in cycles of noticing and reflecting and adjusting our learning and our teaching, it makes a significant difference in both the outcomes for the learners, but also the engagement of learners.
When we are able to create meaningful, formative or embedded and assessment tasks and activities that are really about creating opportunities for students to showcase their knowledge in a multitude of modalities, that they're able to inform us and engage in a conversation where we can say, okay, what knowledge landed here? What information or lessons really went well? And the students are able to say, yes, I grasped this. And what information maybe didn't land the way that we thought it did. And that information is not necessarily to allow us to understand where a student is at or how we would assess them as a learner, but rather how are we doing in the classroom? What information do we need to revisit? How are we coming back to that with a new strategy so that we're creating an opportunity for the students to really be able to thrive and to continue to grow? And so if we think about assessment as being something that is reciprocal, it is that give and take, that exchange of knowledge, that exchange of information within the classroom. That it's a tool to inform us within our own practice to say, how am I constructing this next lesson? What do I need to go back to? What is it that we can move forward on? How are we celebrating what the students do know? And how am I making sure to support them in the areas that they don't? That we're opening up those opportunities for that relationship building because students feel safe in a classroom when they know that they are feeling heard and seen. And in that process, we're being respectful of each and every one of those individuals and where they're coming from and how they walk into a classroom and how they walk out of that classroom feeling cared for and respected.
When I first started teaching, I came across some of Rafi's work around child honoring, and I've really kind of taken that to heart in that all the decisions that I'm making in my work are for them. And it's to get them where they need to be without relying on me, them being able to do it by themselves, if that makes sense. So when I'm looking to help build self-regulated learners, I'm looking to help support kids to have a knowledge of what they're interested in, of what their skills are, of what they need to do to reach their goals and to be able to access their interests in more complex ways and have more freedom to follow the things that they're interested in, because I'm giving them those skills in reading and numeracy and writing that they need to be able to really explore what they're interested in. And in doing that, I really create the environment that they can access everything that they need, and just teaching them within really having a strong focus on social emotional learning as well, so that they can have a good growth mindset and they can work with others and they can have so many positive experiences through play without getting stopped with social pieces that are tricky when you're little.
If we go back and start looking at the research, and I think about research that really shifted the course of what we did in assessment in BC, was an article called Inside the Black Box by Black and William, and I think the date was 1998. And essentially what they said was, the more we do appropriate, timely, individual, and group feedback, the greater the impact on learning. And we've had a history of spending a lot of time on assessment for learning, assessment of learning, which is summative. And so we wait till the learning is finished and then we report out, this is what kids have done. That actually doesn't have much impact at all. And what our job is as teachers is to support the learning of each and every child in our care. And so we want to be helping set them up to be the best they can be. So all along that learning journey, we need to be giving them feedback. What's working? What's not yet working? And what can I do to ask you a question or provide you with some options to help you move on in one piece? And so lots and lots of positive feedback. It's always strength-based, but then not walking away after the positive feedback, but starting with the piece where we have teacher control and we're explicit. We say, here's something you might want to think about next, and help them incorporate that into their practice, individually and also as a group. So when we're working on a project together and I'm noticing things as a teacher that influences my next direct teaching lesson, because I'm using that feedback for myself, but I'm also giving it to the kids. Here's what I'm noticing we're doing well as a group. We also call that building criteria. And then that gives an access point to everybody. No matter who they are, they're looking and saying, I can try and do this a little bit better, rather than just work harder. You know, those general comments or nice work, good vocab, that doesn't tell me what to do next. That just makes me feel good for a moment, but not over time.
So there'll be a self-assessment reflection piece to the board game project, like something that they found interesting, something they found hard, and something that they would improve upon next time.
We just were kind of like giving each other feedback on our board game design, which will eventually make into like a real thing for the lower grades to play. And so the sticky notes were just like, on some of mine, I like it how you drew it, or I wonder how it would look like if you added more information. So that's what we were doing.
I try to give the feedback that I would want to the other people. Yeah, I just want good feedback. They were giving me like feedback about how good it was, and nothing about how I could improve it.
I've been working on empathy interviews with the kids and just really taking that one-on-one conferencing time to talk about, hey, what are you really enjoying learning about? What are your goal setting? We do a lot of goal setting routines kind of built in throughout the day so that they can be reflecting on what they're doing, and then conferences adding on to that. So I'm joining them, okay, you're seeing this is what I'm seeing, and I'm giving them feedback within that. And then we're also working on a lot of peer feedback. So how can we ask good questions? How can we help each other expand on what we're talking about and that kind of thing? We do a lot of learning through that. So I'm using the curriculum and their interests as kind of a vehicle to build these skills for them to become self-regulated learners, to kind of grow at their own rate with their own interests.
Let's see assessment as not events along the way, but let's see assessment as authentic, as ways in which we can, have these sort of direct lines to parents, ongoing feedback with students. And how do we change the narrative to not look at it from what children don't have, but perhaps what are they capable of and what are the strengths that they already possess?
It's focusing on the growth, giving the kids a chance to develop a growth mindset. They come in with a wide variety of skills and talents, and beginning of the year I try to emphasize to the kids, like, it's a clean slate. If you weren't strong or confident in math last year, forget about all that. I'm there to help you, and you're there to help yourself, and we'll work as a team. And I think them just hearing that from the outset helps. And of course, as a teacher, you do your best with 28, 30 kids to get around to all of them, but if you get them thinking about their learning and you get them feeling like it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to even fail a little bit, those little failures, I think it can go a long way for them.
So when we're looking at assessment, one of the strategies or principles that we learned with Black and William was thinking about strategies that we use to open up our classrooms, to invite reasoning. And so part of that is around open-ended questions. And those open-ended questions set us up so that we hear more student voices, we can better prize the diversity rather than one right answer, and it allows us then to think as we do in gradual release, from me being the ownership of assessment and giving you the feedback, to being able to do this when we've practiced it and we've started to internalize it, to be able to do it with peers, and then to be able to do it myself. Because really the part that's the most important in assessment is me looking at something that I've done and saying, here's where I'm proud, and here's where I'd like to have some advice or some feedback, and here's what I'd like you to notice about my work. Because then we set our own targets as we're going within that umbrella of what we're doing as teachers and guiding everybody with high expectations as we move through. When we do that with kids and we allow their voices to be honored and respected and part of the process of everything that we do in the classroom, ownership changes. So we're all in this together. Instead of it being my class, it's our class. Instead of these being the things that I want us to do, these are the things that I'm helping decide we want to do, because that's my teaching role. And here's how we all join in together to own that learning process.
The work that I do tends to start with where our students are at in using formative assessment, and trying to encourage our teachers to use what they see in the conversations that they have with their students in order to determine a personalized approach to how they can best support their students in their learning. We really try to concentrate on our teachers thinking about using observation and conversation in their practices and honoring that as a tool for assessment, as it says within the assessment and reporting guidelines that we've received. We also try to encourage students to take ownership of their learning and again set goals for them to notice their learning and celebrate their understanding and their growth.
With some of my students this year, we went to buddy reading. So I took my group of grade 8s to a group of grade 3 class at an elementary school, and they buddy read. So we reflected on that pretty much every time we went, because there was always things that I think behaviorally could be improved upon. So students, we would talk about what good mentorship looks like, connecting with your little buddy rather than your big buddies. So that was like a verbal sort of and then insightful reflection where they're just thinking. When it comes to more tangible, assignments, they usually get a rubric, which I'd like to co-create more in the future. And we sit down and kind of go through what that looks like in terms of what the goal is and where they could be better and what they did well. So the strengths and stretches are always something I talk about with students. But I think that helps their self-reflection process. And it can't be in my lingo or terms. You have to help them understand what it means and what it looks like. So if we're talking about writing, what does it mean to have a good amount of evidence? It looks like direct quotations, it looks like explaining those, just being really clear about what that looks like for the student so that they can understand it.
It showed me that some stuff that I am struggling with, but my research and other projects were better. So it gave me a sense of where I'm at. Well, it shows that I have some confidence in myself and that I am learning and all that I'm doing.
When I first started making the paragraph, my first paragraph, I didn't really know much about the proficiency scale and the criteria. But in December, I knew more about it and I looked at the criteria. And I used more quotes because that's what I needed to do, and I got an extending.
The big thing is the weekly report that I do, so that forces the kids every Friday afternoon. They have a little bit of flex time or work on an art project, wrap up some homework, tidy up their desk, and while that's all going on, they're also expected to do that self-reflection, and it's just, how were you with listening this week? How were you with social responsibility? How did you engage in your learning? And then they have to say something they're proud of or they did well for that week, school related, and then something that they'd like to improve upon on the next week. And one thing you're thankful for, the beautiful thing about that, it gives you as a teacher a chance to gain some insight on that Friday afternoon about what's going on in their lives as well. Because when you have 28, 30 kids, it's tough. And yeah, that's been a real silver lining, is not only are they thinking about their learning and how they need to improve and celebrating their successes, but you're also able to give them a pat on the back or learn who their friends are. It's just been a great way to end the week, and it can be chaotic sometimes, but it's worthwhile.
We reference the proficiency scale often. I will use language like, if you're someone who understands that perimeter equals double the length and double the width, that you're probably a proficient learner. If you need some help to make that connection, then you're likely developing, which is great because we're all on a path of learning and sometimes we need help with things that feel hard. If you're emerging and you need a lot of help, great, we're just getting you going on your path, and what are the tools and strategies that you need to help you move along it. And the kids are really good about checking in with that proficiency scale and saying, I think I'm at about developing, or I'm somewhere between developing and proficient. And so I'll say, well, if you want to level up, what is it that you need to show so that you are proficient? Or how will you stretch yourself so that you're extending? So we use that language quite a bit, and they're using that language, which is awesome. And level up, we like to connect it to video game talk because for them, that's just where they're at. So they want to level up.
I find that, especially with the struggling students, it's kind of helped a lot more. It's not as disheartening, right? It's to be at emerging, it shows like, hey, we're going to be moving forward. When you're trying hard and say getting a C- or an F, it is more difficult. I think the biggest shift has been those struggling learners. It allows them to grow a little more, I guess.
You know, we always ask them, like, is this your best? Are you good with this? No. And they'll go back and they'll do it, or whatever. And sometimes they will be like, yeah, I'm done. This is the best I can give you today. And, and so that kind of criterion is really great for, especially with our vulnerable learners, because then they know their best is whatever they can give us that day. And if it's 9 pages of writing or a sentence, it doesn't matter. It's valued because they've done their best. And so, a lot of our criteria is that. Is this your best work?
Yeah.
Have you, shared your information the best way that you can?
Yeah.
And it's not for us to say whether it's their best or not, or their buddies or anybody else. It's that criteria belongs to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, peer and self-assessment are important because, especially at this age, grade 6, they often look up to their peers even more so, or respect the opinions of their peers more so than adults in their lives. So that's the big reason. But it also allows them to look at that criteria or the expectations, the learning intentions one more time. Because you going in front of the class and showing them or discussing it together doesn't mean they're paying attention, but holding them accountable, asking them to have those conversations with their peer, whether written or informally, just in conversation, I think just gives them a good reminder. And every Monday I put them in with an AB partner. The goal is by the end of the year, they've worked with everybody in the room. And it's gone seamlessly. As long as you start that at the beginning of the year, I think that's great. And then you already have your partners. They have that peer editor or that peer evaluator on hand, either sitting beside them or in another corner of the room that they can lean on for advice and throughout the week.
One thing I'm working on with my kids is kind of strengthening peer assessment. So getting them to kind of dive deeper into rubrics. Recently we did with our narrative writing unit. Walking through the rubric with the class, but then having them pair up before they share their work to work through the rubric together and then actually give them feedback based on the rubric. So they're kind of supporting each other, and then when they're doing their own self-assessment, they have a greater awareness of the rubric.
Our biggest goal with that was, and it's sort of our primary goal for all of this, is having ownership over their learning, but then also building that respect for each other's learning and appreciating the fact that everybody is different and everybody learns differently and everybody shares their learning differently, but it's equally valuable.
I guess to say more of the same thing is developing a student agency, and so that they are able to take charge of their own learning and however that looks like and feels best to them in a way that showcases their best skills. Also, just giving them that flexibility and being able to see them for who they are and how that's going to translate in their future.
Now we're doing the learning summaries 3 times a year. Last year was twice, but one of the expectations is the kids reflect on their core competencies. So I've built a big sheet with bullet points that have a variety of I statements pertaining to each of the core competencies and some of the sub-competencies. And so that just kind of guides them, so they're not going in blind going, how am I with communicating? They read those I statements, they pick one that they feel they've been really successful with, and then one that they feel they still need to really work on. And then they have to try and give one piece of evidence or an example that supports their answer. And first go round in the fall, it usually takes them quite a while, but I know we went through it today and it's pretty seamless. They know what the core competencies are, and like I tell them, these aren't just school skills, these are life skills.
We're designing assessment that really celebrates and informs us so that we can be those responsive teachers. We can be those teachers that really build on the gifts of every child and grow learning, the magic of learning every day.